Yo, party people. Okay, December 15th, number 2. All right, so we are in John chapter 9. It's awesome. Jesus just healed the blind man who was blind from birth. We saw him interact with his parents. If you haven't seen the first video, please go back and watch the first video from today. It's really, the story is awesome. And so now his parents bring him to the religious leaders because this happened on the Sabbath, right? They don't want to get in trouble. Rumors, of course, the rumors are already exploding because everybody's known this child since he was born. He was born blind, had been begging his whole life outside the temple, and now he's healed, right? So his parents are freaked out too. So they bring him to the religious leaders because they want to make sure that they know that something happened, that the religious leaders know that the parents recognize that something happened on the Sabbath and it shouldn't have happened, but they didn't do it, right? So, he's brought into the Jews, the Jewish leaders. The Jewish leaders ask him, who do you say he is? And he said, and so the guy whose eyes were healed said he is a prophet. Earlier, when the neighbors questioned him, he called Jesus a man. Now he's calling him a prophet when they ask him, because they're arguing back and forth. Some of the Pharisees and Sadducees are starting to recognize there's something weird going on here. They're not ready to call him Messiah, but they're recognizing that there's something going on here. And so they're arguing back and forth. So they asked the man that he had healed, what do you say about him? And he said, he is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been born blind. I'm on chapter 9, verse 18. And received his sight until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. So they called him his parents. And they asked them, saying, now this section is legalistic. This is like the language that's used in the original is like they are like in a courtroom, right? And the parents recognize this. Is this your son? Question number 1. Who you say was born blind? Question number 2, right? How then does he now see? Question number 3. His parents answered them and said, answer to the number 1, we know that this is our son. So very simple answer, answering the first question. And that he was born blind, answer to the second question, very simple. But by what means he now sees, we do not know. So that's the answer to the third one, because they say, how then does he now see? Right? And they're like, but by what means he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes. So they even go a little bit further. We don't know who did this. We do not know. It says, he is of age, ask him. So, which is totally lame. They push it off on their son. He will speak for himself. And then it says in verse 22, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So verse 24, so they again called the man who was blind and said to him, give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. So they're saying, like, honor God, be truthful. We know that this man who healed you is a sinner. So the man who had been blind answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. So again, this was a legal type answer from the man who was healed. Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. So he's answering their specific statement that Jesus was a sinner. And this guy's like, I don't know if he's a sinner. But one thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. Awesome. That's an awesome statement because it's so simple and yet it's perfect. It's like, I don't know what he is, who he is, or how he did this. But all I know is I didn't see before. I was born that way and now I see. It's like, freaking awesome. Then they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them and said, I told you already, and you did not listen. So they're not listening at all, right? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. So once again, they're placing Moses way up here, right? We know that God spoke to Moses, which is why they have Moses way up there. As for this fellow, we don't know where he's from. The man answered them, the man who Jesus healed answered them and said to them, this is awesome. Why, this is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him and said to him, you were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us? And they cast him out. Okay, so that here they're referring back to him being blind in the womb, right? So they're preaching that belief system where there was some kind of sin, and because he was a sinner and was born blind, he has no authority to teach them, right? They are Moses's disciples. Ugh, so crazy. Okay, so then we got verse 35. Jesus heard that they had, so then this says true vision and true blindness. So that's the title of this section. Chapter 35, verse 35, chapter 9. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, so he was looking for him, Jesus said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? The man who had been formerly blind answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? So it appears here that he doesn't even quite recognize Jesus. It's possible because when he probably healed his eyes, he may have seen Jesus, but everything would have been new, and he would have just been overwhelmed, right, with his senses. And so it says, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. So by that statement, he's referring back to the fact that he couldn't see before. So now he's seen, and he can see him, the Savior. And so, and it is he who is talking with you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. So originally, which is awesome, he called him man, then he called him a prophet, now he calls him Lord, and he worships him. He recognizes him. And the commentary also went on to say that this man is one of just a few people that Jesus flat out, completely and totally said, I am the Messiah to, right? And Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, are we blind also? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see, therefore your sin remains. So that's an awesome section. So literally, everyone around him, when he's talking to this man, recognizes that this man was blind. Jesus had a part in his healing. He healed him. So when they see him worship Jesus, right, as God. So then, in the midst of all of these people, Jesus makes this statement, for judgment I have come into this world. Now, he's not coming to judge, but what happens is by accepting or rejecting him, that judgment comes, right? It's not that he's judging, it's your choice results in the judgment, right? And then he's referring right back to the miracle that those who do not see may see, but those who see may be made blind. Those that are supposed to know, just like this guy when he was saying to them, well, this is great. You don't even know where he's from, right? These are the ones that are supposed to know. The Pharisees and the Sadducees are supposed to be able to recognize the Messiah. That's the whole point. That's what they're studying for, right? And looking for. And that he's here and they don't recognize him. And so then he's just calling them out again. If you were blind, you would have no sin. So if they literally were blind and they could not see, they would have no sin. But they think they can see. Because he says, but now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. So now we're in chapter 10. So this is continuation, right? Nothing has changed. He's still in the same place and he's still teaching. Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice, yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. So what's interesting here is at first he's the door, right? He's the only door. There's only one door. And they described how at night and this was a very known, everybody had sheep, so everybody knew what he was talking about. There would be one entrance to the sheep pen at night, and they would have someone who would take care of the sheep at night for the shepherds, and they would sleep with the sheep, and then in the morning, and multiple shepherds would have their sheep together. So in the morning, when the hireling would open the door, all the sheep would only go to their shepherd, right? Because they knew the shepherd, they knew his voice, and so there could be 1,000,000 sheep in there, but they would separate themselves and go to their own shepherd, right? I got to go, I'm out of time, so stay tuned for number 3. Hold tight, read your Bible, Jesus is coming. Peace.